Alrighty, everybody, it is currently Thursday, September 18th, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from the inside of a giant peach. All right, that was all I could come up with for this one, but it is Thursday, and I was thinking about this recently, and Thursday's got to be my favorite of the days of the week. Obviously we're not including Saturday or Sunday, but I might prefer Thursday to Sunday. I don't prefer Thursday to Saturday, but I think of all seven, Thursday is my second favorite. It's definitely my favorite of the 5 weekdays. And I know a lot of people are big Friday guys, but there's a few Monday people out there that are just ready to absolutely get it over the course of the week, and I applaud those individuals. I do. Those are the people that shape the world that we live in, but I'm the Thursday guy. You know what I mean? I'm not going to shape the world that we live in. I'm going to kind of just like nestle out a little hole where I can just lay for about 40 years until I die. I'd say 40 years is probably how many I got under my belt, and I don't want to make it past 70, I'd say. So, but I'm a big Thursday guy, and I think the reason that I prefer Thursdays over Fridays is because of uh, just like the general impatience that I feel over the course of a Friday. Now, granted, I'm a college student and I don't have a job, so for me, basically every day is the weekend. I go to class for like 2 hours, uh, then I do my homework. I do my homework. I definitely there's no robot out there that does it for me. I do my homework, and that's like 3 hours out of the day. So for me, every day kind of is the weekend, but I still feel the same anticipation for the weekend that I feel like everyone else does, right? Because I don't have to wake up at a certain time. I don't have to, like, even going to class for an hour a day is still, it's an annoying place to be in. I'd say I've had a job before, one singular job before. I'm 21 years old and I've had one job before. Um, and this is why you shouldn't respect my opinions, because I've had one job before and I'm 21. But still, I would say 8 hours at a job versus like 3 hours in a classroom, I'd say they're about equal. You know what I mean? Especially in the classes that I'm in. I'm not in some big lecture hall where I can just like stare at my computer the entire time. I've got like 30 people in the class maximum. So you really got to be locked in, you know what I mean? You can't be gooning on Instagram Reels or whatever. You can't be watching you can't be watching fucking IDF Israeli thirst traps on Instagram Reels while you're in the classes that I'm in. So, yeah, but just like all the anticipation that builds up, you know, over the course of a Friday, I would say I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of that Friday anticipation. I'd say it's on par with a Sunday scaries type situation. Although I feel like most of the, negative connotation that people have with Sundays can be more contributed towards hangovers as opposed to the impending Monday, you know? Because as a kid, I didn't have the Sunday scaries, dude. And I still don't have the Sunday scaries because I don't drink. So most people go out and they drink on Saturday nights, or they stay in on and they drink on Saturday nights. Actually, most people are probably staying in and drinking on Saturday nights and getting in arguments with their wives or girlfriends or whatever, and then waking up for an extremely depressing Sunday. Uh, so, so I don't get any of the Sunday scares, but I get a bit of it, you know what I mean? That just fuck tomorrow's Monday, but I don't know, I'm not freaking out. To me scaries implies that you're freaking out a little bit. But for me it's more of a just goddamn, you know what I mean? That's what I feel on Sunday. Um but yeah, I'm a big Thursday guy. Just overall, I enjoy it a lot more. I feel like it's the most laid back of the days of the week because, like I said, there's that general anxiety, that anticipation, like a racehorse in a stable before a race. Like, that's what I feel on a Friday. Whereas on a Thursday, I'm just like, dude, it's fucking, I'm going to class. I'm not paying attention. You know what I mean? I'm not even bringing a pen or a pencil with me. I'm just going to try to memorize calculus. I'm gonna I'm gonna try to memorize an hour's worth of calculus. What the fuck? All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to stop the recording real quick. Once again, another roommate scare. You know what I mean? A lot of people are concerned about the red scare. I'm more of a roommate scare type of guy. You know what I mean? That's a bigger threat to me than totalitarian communism. But yeah, just Thursdays, I'm just showing up, no anticipation, just it's very laid back day. You know what I mean? It's the Hawaii of days. It's the Jamaica of days. It's just a general laid back mood going on. But I guess some people do go out on Thursdays because that's, I guess, what was going on with the roommate scare. You know, they're gonna go out and fail to get pussy, which, hey, the fucking better than me. I don't even try, so I can't talk too much shit. I can almost talk no shit at all. But and there might also be in the background a grinding noise. I've said this before, but my dorm room is literally right next to, not even adjacent to. I share a wall with a room that says machine room, big metal door, a solid metal. This thing might be made out of vibranium for all I know. But, and I don't know what it does, right? Because we don't have central AC, or some of the building has central AC, but most of the building uses window units for cooling. So I don't know what this machine room is doing. It can't be water, right? Because that goes through pipes and shit. Maybe there are some like gears involved in the pipe process. I don't know. Maybe water needs a transmission. I don't fucking know exactly what it is, but it is grinding. It is not whirring. You know, there is a bit of a whirring noise that you guys might hear, but this is a deep grinding. You know what I mean? I got a new car now, but the car I drove last week, literally last week, I was driving this car, piece of shit transmission fluid was leaking out of there constantly, and so I know what a grinding noise sounds like, and this is gears grinding. I don't know if they've ever done any work on this machinery at all because it literally sounds like two pieces of metal just grinding against each other as hard as they can with, I mean, zero lubrication. This thing sounds, the equivalent is like prison butt sex. Like that's what this that's what this sounds like, dude. No lube, no, not even a hint of mayonnaise or anything. Just straight up fucking raw, burning. Just, I don't know what it is. I literally cannot, for the life of me, think of what it could possibly be. I don't know. Maybe they're running a fucking auto body shop right next to me. But it is a very, very loud grinding noise. It almost doesn't even sound like metal sometimes. Sometimes it sounds like two rocks just grinding into each other, you know what I mean? It sounds like a canyon is being formed, some sort of major geological event. It sounds like it's going on in the room next to me sometimes, and it permeates the entire room. It's never woken me up in the middle of the night, but really nothing does. I'm a pretty deep sleeper like that. Although I did have a nightmare last night where someone was like watching me through my window and texting me. And let me tell you, some people think in a serial killer situation, they would be like completely cool, calm, and collected and they would do all the right things. You know what I mean? Like when people watch a horror movie and they're like, oh, I just like run away. But for me, I was just like freaking out and I just went to the middle room where there was no windows and I was like, all right, he's not watching me anymore. I know that much now. And I was like, because it was the middle of the night, right? If it was the middle of the day, yeah, I would have run out there and just started screaming, you know what I mean? Like that scene from what's it called, Split or whatever, where the guy starts running on all fours, you know, the meme of the bald guy running on all fours. I would have just straight up done that. But in the nightmare, it was the middle of the night. And so I was just like, man, I don't know. If he kills me tonight, he kills me tonight. I'm gonna go to sleep and, and fucking deal with it tomorrow. So, and maybe that reflects more on me as an individual as opposed to like the entire populace of this country. But me, I was just like, I'm in the middle room now. I'll hear if he breaks a window. There's someone in that other room right next to me. I'm just gonna go to sleep on the couch. I think that's a fair it's a fair way to deal with that situation. Although the whole thing wasn't a nightmare. I know some people, like the way some people talk about nightmares, it sounds like it's happening through the entire night. For me, my nightmares I either wake up from them or like the nightmare resolves itself while I'm sleeping. Like for this one, I don't know. I just ended up like underground in like a cave somewhere, just with like people that I knew. So I was like, all right, I guess this guy's not, following me and like stalking me anymore. And so it was actually pretty chill. But if I have a nightmare, typically I will wake up from it. I have a lot of drowning nightmares. A lot of nightmares just the other day, this is probably one of the most embarrassing things that's ever in it's a pretty high bar in terms of embarrassment for myself. I embarrass myself constantly. But this nightmare is one of the most embarrassing things. So I'm one of those people that I have a super deep fear of the open ocean. Like I can deal with it if I'm watching a nature documentary or something like that. But if you like even showed me a picture of the open ocean, I'm even thinking of it right now and I'm like squirming. You know what I mean? Like and not just like if I'm looking at the top of the ocean, I'm chill. But like when the camera's actually in the water, I freak out. Like that's a legitimate like phobia that I have. Like I'm scared of snakes and spiders and all that stuff, but I can deal with it. Like heights, I'm scared of that, but I can deal with it. The open ocean though, for some reason just and it's not like a fear of like I guess it is a fear of like what's in there, but like space, I don't know, space doesn't scare me. I feel like a lot of the people that are scared of the open ocean like I am are also very scared of space. Space I don't know. I just don't give a shit. I'm not scared of it at all. But the open ocean, like I freeze up when I see it. I'm just like Christ, and I like flex every muscle in my body, and I grit my teeth. It's a true phobia, like in the most like deep sense of the word. I can feel it in my spirit. I don't know. And I've never been. I'm a pretty decent swimmer because I'm white, but I'm a pretty decent swimmer, and I've like swimmed. I don't know in lakes and all that stuff. And that does freak me out a little bit, but I'm just not as scared of it. I fish, I do all that stuff. I am more of a forest guy though. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm more of a forest guy than I am, I guess, a beach guy. But even at the beach, I don't know. It's just like the pictures of it that really freak me out. Cause like when I was surfing, I didn't give a shit at all. I was just like, and to be fair, I was surfing in LA, right? And the water around LA is just so poisoned by like chemicals and fucking sewage runoff and all that stuff that there's no way anything's living in there. And there's no way anything's living in there that's like large enough to hurt me. So maybe I was able to rationalize it like that in my brain. But I'm terrified of the open ocean, right? Like especially just like pictures of it just like irk me so deeply, just in my spirit. And it's like a lot of the times when I get angry, I get scared. Like if I'm watching a horror movie or whatever. But this just it literally paralyzes me with fear. I hit the Charlie Kirk. I, I freeze up and I just fall to the side. Too soon, too soon for guys to make jokes about things. It is. People are gonna be angry about that, but hey, I'm not fucking Jimmy Kimmel. You can't fire me from my show, which he got fired because his show sucked, and no one watched it, and they just used that as an excuse to fire him. Although maybe they did fire him, but he didn't even joke about Charlie Kirk. Like that's the thing. I thought I was gonna. I ran across a clip of it on TikTok, and usually I wouldn't watch something like that because I don't know. I just don't care about it. But I was like, I'll see what he said. And I thought it was gonna be like the way other libs are talking about it, where they're like, good he died, or all that dumb shit that they have to say about it. But it was just like the most typical, like liberal modern late night show shit ever. It was just like Trump is a piece of shit. Like that's basically what he said. But he said it within like the context of Charlie Kirk's death. So so people are saying that's why he was fired. He was fired because he's unfunny and no one watches his show. The only reason cable still exists is because of the news and sports. There's no other reason for anyone to use cable. And yeah, it's an older people thing. My parents, we haven't had cable in well over a decade. No one watches cable anymore. That's why Jimmy Fallon's show got canceled. You know, the only good thing about his show was that little Mexican dude, Guillermo. That was it. You know what I mean? But back to my fear of the ocean, or the nightmare. So in this nightmare, I was like, I don't know, I was like talking to someone, and I was just like, oh, let's watch some YouTube or something like that. And so we were like scrolling through YouTube on the TV, and every single one of the thumbnails on YouTube was like a picture of like the shark of a shark in the ocean. And it was just every single picture. And I just kept like scrolling through, and I was just paralyzed with fear, just being like, please get me away from this, just like scrolling through through it all. One of the most maybe it's a sign that I need to stop watching so much YouTube or just chill out with the technology as a whole. But and I don't know, I was just like scrolling through YouTube and every thumbnail was like a shark in the ocean. And I was just like freaking out about it. And I just like refused to look away. Right? I refuse to look away. It's like, dude, I don't. I was gonna try to make a joke about like chicks being at the bar and being like, this guy won't stop talking to me. And instead of just like walking away, you continue to talk to the guy. That was the comparison I was gonna come up with because it was like, why don't I just look away from the TV? But I don't know. It's not as good as a of a comparison, but I think it's an apt one. I think it's decent enough. You know what I mean? Because you'll hear that sometimes. You'll hear that shit sometimes from women where it's like, this guy's being so creepy in my DMs, or this guy keeps hitting on me at the bar, and it's just like, close the phone or walk away from him. I don't know. And then you're gonna have the people come at it being like, no, you don't understand it. And it's like, yeah, I guess I don't. I don't know. I don't I don't know what it is like to have someone be creepy around you. I don't know. No one, I'm not, I don't have anything physically to offer anyone that would make them want to be creepy around me. So yeah, I get it. I don't understand it, but it's also like, I don't know, you're in a crowded place. I don't think that's the place where something's gonna go down. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. And people are gonna say all this shit. You don't understand feminine, and they're gonna bring up slavery and fucking all this bullshit. The Holocaust somehow is gonna get brought up in there. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I was just terrified of it. Terrified of the YouTube thumbnails of the open ocean. Just deeply, deep in my heart. Just the same fear I feel when I'm awake. And usually in my nightmares, I'm able to get a bit of a run. You know what I mean? If there's like a spooky ghost or something chasing me, even if the ghost is keeping up with me as I run, I'm still able to like try and get myself out of the situation. But this one was just completely um self-invoked. What the fuck? All right. I thought someone was knocking at the door. Sorry. Our bathroom doesn't have a lock on it. For some reason, I don't know why. So every time anyone goes into the bathroom, they have to like knock at the door. So that's probably what it was. Or was it? Is this another spooky ghost? Is it the dude who was staring at me through the window? Is he coming to get me now? I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. That has nothing to do with today's episode, although it kind of does, because we do got a little bit of some people's fears involved in here. You know what I mean? Like I said, the fear of the ocean, Antarctica. I don't know. That's like a pretty spooky thing. It's just like this completely white, lifeless, just hellscape. It's kind of like Utah. You know what I mean? Just all white, very off-putting, very bland. It's basically it's like Salt Lake City. That's kind of what Antarctica is like. It's a creepy place, although I've always wanted to go. I think it would just be very interesting. I was actually watching I was watching a nature documentary recently. I don't know. I've just been on a big nature documentary kick. But I was watching, I think it was called Frozen Planet, or it might have been Planet Earth or something like that. It was one of those David Attenborough things, and they were talking about the Antarctic, and there's this type of seal that lives in the Antarctic. It's like the southernmost, like most extreme uh mammal in terms of like its latitude of where it lives at. It's like the southernmost uh mammal on the planet. It might even be like the most extreme one in terms of like its closeness to the poles, right? Because you got the North Pole, but like I don't know how much shit lives up there, although maybe, but I don't really know. But anyway, it's just like this type of seal. You know what I mean? It's a classic seal, very fat, and we're gonna talk about seals later on in this, but this seal, very classic looking seal, and I mean, poops out a baby in the middle of like an Antarctic storm. It poops out this baby, and this baby comes out screaming. I mean, obviously, it was just in like a nice warm hot tub, and then you throw it out in the middle of the fucking Antarctic. It's like those dudes that do like the sauna and then the cold plunge and all that, except 10 times harder. And this is a fucking baby that we're dealing with here. And so the mom poops out the baby. She just shits that thing right out, comes out covered in blood and guts and all that. And she shits it out, and then this storm comes in, right? It's the Antarctic, so this is a pretty cold storm. Although I think it's like summer in the Antarctic, which I guess is technically our winter, but whatever. It's like the warm part of the Antarctic season, but it's still the Antarctic, and the storm starts coming through, and the narrator David Attenborough is like, the baby cannot survive in these temperatures, and the mother cannot either. So she must go under the ice, or wait here to protect her baby. It's a very tough choice for her. And it's clearly not a tough choice because this mom seal that literally just pooped out this baby runs away as fast as her fat fucking belly can carry her, and she dips out underneath the ice to like stay away from the storm and just leaves the baby up there. This thing is like this seal probably weighs 1,000 pounds, and 500 pounds of it are like fat and fur to like insulate it. And it just refuses to stay up there and like protect the baby from this fucking like below freezing cold storm. And she just leaves the baby up there. And this baby did survive, but like it shows, I guess this is like the seal birthing season because there was like a ton of other baby seals, and all the other moms, the seal moms, abandoned their baby seals to go underneath the water, and it shows just like a field of dead baby seals. And it's like, dude, a lot of people out there, especially like I'm an environmental science major, there's a lot of animal rights people out there and a lot of conservationist people out there. And we do need to work on conservation and protecting our natural environment. But some species should go extinct, dude. Some like these fucking things just left their babies out there in the middle of an Antarctic storm. Dude, yeah, you can go extinct. It's just it's like the pandas, dude. It's like let the fucking pandas go extinct, dude. They're carnivores and they eat nothing but grass, right? Because I think bamboo is technically a type of grass. It's like let those fuckers go extinct, dude. They chose to do the wrong thing, right? That's how I feel about these seals. It's like fucking let them all die. We don't need to worry about global warming or whatever to protect these seals. All of them deserve to die. They just literally all the seal moms with their freshly pooped out babies left them to go under the ice. It was, I mean, just cold as hell, bro. Colder than the Antarctic. Which brings us to today's episode. The theme of today's, or the story. I guess this one is more of a story than a theme. Because today's episode is about this guy, uh, Amundsen's South Pole expedition. This guy, or Amundsen. It's Amundsen. Amundsen. I don't know exactly what it is. He's fucking Norwegian. So this guy, spoiler alert, first guy to make it like fully to the South Pole. Other people had been to Antarctica at that point, but there is some bullshit parts of Antarctica where it's just like an island and they're like, this is technically Antarctica. And it's like, dude, fucking is it? You know what I mean? It's cold there, but it's not Antarctica. This dude went legit to the South Pole. You know what I mean? Not even like there's nothing living out there. Like the only things that live in Antarctica live like on the coasts. There's nothing that lives inland like at all. Like it's literally just a barren wasteland. Um, but this guy, our boy Amundsen, I'm probably just gonna say Amundsen the whole time because that's easier for me to pronounce, but Amundsen, he went there, dude. Crossed this barren landscape. It honestly looks pretty sick. Like those pictures of like deep inside Antarctica where it's just pure white. I actually kind of like the look of it a little bit. I'm a big fan of surrealist art. So, and I think Antarctica looks pretty similar to a lot of the landscapes in there. So let's read about this guy. So this guy, Roald Amundsen was born in southern Norway in 1872. So that was kind of a lot earlier than I was thinking. Like, there's all those famous expedition or pictures of the expeditions to like the North Pole that the Soviets did. I assumed the North Pole was like a 50s type of thing. Because you got to remember, they didn't even get to the top of fucking Everest until the 1950s. So I assume this was kind of like a similar timeline. Now, this dude was born in 1872, dude. This guy was around, I don't know what was going, that was a pretty boring time period in terms of history. The scramble for Africa, I guess that happened around this time in 1888. But I mean, other than that, not a whole lot was going on back then. But 1872, god damn, he was born in the 1800s and he made it to the South Pole. That's crazy, dude. Like, just how quickly humanity progressed over the course of the 19th century and the 20th century is just fucking insane. Like, at the beginning of the 20th or the 19th century, they were fighting wars with muskets and shit. And then this dude walked across a barren wasteland to the South Pole. Although, as we get into it, it kind of seems like someone could have done it a bit earlier. He really didn't use any crazy technology like that. So, but we got to learn about his life story first. You know what I mean? He was born in Norway, but he was kind of born in like the bullshit part of Norway where it's like it's not what you think of when you think of Norway. It's definitely still cold as shit and they definitely eat pickled fish or whatever there. But he wasn't born, up in like Lapland and all that stuff. He was born down south, more towards the Germanic part. He was born, if you know where Oslo is in Norway, he was born 60 kilometers to the east of that on like the opposite coast of Norway. That's where this guy came from. So then he was just chilling there, 1872. So he originally studied medicine, but he left college in 1893 to become a seaman on a sailing boat to the Arctic. So I said we were going to talk about seals a little later on in this episode, and a sealing boat, like I heard sealing and I imagined like that it's literally just like a super sealed boat, right? And that's the type of boat you have to use to go to the Arctic. No, it's a boat for killing seals, just clubbing seals into complete and utter smithereens. And you hear the word clubbing seals, and the reason they club seals is the same reason why they trapped beaver as opposed to hunting them. It's to preserve the pelt of the seal, right? That's why they were hunting these seals in the first place. That's why they were clubbing them to death, is to get the hide of the seal. But the way they do it is to preserve the hide of the seal. But he wasn't beating the seals to death. He did some other uh, not cruel things to animals, but definitely not, us with our modern Western values would not necessarily like what he did. But he was not involved in the clubbing of the seals at all. You know what I mean? He wasn't going big Poppy Ortiz on that thing with a baseball bat, an aluminum baseball bat, just dinging it off a seal's head. He wasn't doing any of that. He was just a classic seaman sailing on that boat, you know what I mean, heading up north. And he was going to the Arctic. And this was around the time of like the earliest Arctic explorations. And really, they didn't make it to the North Pole until like over a decade after this dude was chilling with the seals and stuff. And the way they did it is kind of fucking crazy to me. It really is like these guys were putting their lives on the line to get to a place that has nothing there. Like I can at least understand like the conquistadors going to like Mexico and like Peru and all that shit. I can understand them doing that. These motherfuckers were literally risking their lives to like see snow. It's crazy. You know what I mean? They're kind of like black D1 college athletes. They're risking their lives for the snow. Right? And by that I mean snow bunnies. So while he was doing all that, and this 1893 was his first trip to the Arctic, but his entire sailing career was, I think, exclusively in the Arctic, and he kept doing that for a while. But he eventually achieved the rank of second mate and became proficient in cross country skiing. And cross country skiing is you're not going down a hill, you're going across flat land. So he got really good at that, just basically was very good at traversing the snow. This guy just loved the Arctic and all that shit. Makes sense. He was born in Norway, but still, like I said, he was born in southern Norway. You know what I mean? It's not as cold as you might think. It's probably not even as cold as like Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm sure in like the summertime, Minneapolis is warmer than Oslo, Norway, but in the fucking winter, dude, it gets cold as shit up there, you know? So, but this guy, he just loved the fucking Arctic. And by the way, all these ranks are like, you need to get these ranks in order to captain a ship at this time, you know, which I guess you kind of do now, but I'm sure a lot of those like dudes that pilot fishing boats, they're not like officially a second mate or whatever. But back then, you did have to achieve these official ranks, and a lot of it was like related to the European royalty and all that stuff. That's where they got a lot of their funding, and so he was officially a second mate. He officially becomes a first mate at some point. It didn't really specify when, and he was cross country skiing in his off time around then. So in 1896, he joined Adrien de Gerlache's expedition to the Antarctic. And this dude, Adrian, he's from Belgium. So, you know, he ain't used to the fucking winter like that. Like our boy Roald, that's probably how I refer to him instead of Amundsen. Roald, he was used to that shit. You know what I mean? Like I said, Oslo doesn't get like maybe as cold as you might think, but he's still used to the frigid temperatures. But this boy Adrian, he's from fucking Belgium. You know what I mean? They're riding around on bicycles, picking tulips. I know that's the Netherlands, but still, how fucking different can the Netherlands and Belgium be? Especially at this point, fucking, you know what I mean, or this modern point in history. It's all just dudes from like Syria and Turkey in Belgium and the Netherlands. So they're really not that different. And even back then, I imagine they were pretty fucking similar. You know, I don't imagine you cross the the border between the Netherlands and Belgium and there just stops being tulips and fucking, you know, windmills and shit everywhere. So I imagine they were pretty similar. Um, and yeah, this guy was just he wasn't built like our boy Rolt. You know what I mean? Adrian de Gerlache, he just wasn't like that. And I don't know, he might have been, I'll look it up real quick, but de Gerlache, you know, a lot of those like royal European names or like noble European names have they, which means of, or in other names it's von. So this guy, yeah, doesn't no doesn't say who he was born to at all. But yeah, I don't know. Just the name alone it sounds very no nobility to me. Whereas this guy, our boy Rold, his dad was like a shipbuilder and his mom was like a she was a sewer or a seamstress. I think that's the word. He wasn't born, you know, high up like that. He didn't have Day in his last name. He was just Roald Amundsen. So I don't think this boy Adrian was really prepared for that shit like that. So in early 1898, and by the way, all these expeditions are like 10 years long. I'm dead serious. These dudes were spending like 10 years of their lives just to get the snow. It's an incredible amount of dedication. So in early 1898, Degerlache's ship became stuck in seasonal sea ice. The official name for this type of ice is called pack ice, but seasonal sea ice basically means the same thing. So it's, you know what I mean? Obviously, you got summer and winter and all that stuff, and the ice freezes and then it melts and it just does that, which I don't know, maybe that's an indication that sea levels aren't going to rise as much as they will because, like, dude, every summer for us, but I guess winter for Antarctica because it's on the opposite side of the world, Antarctica like doubles in size every single, I guess technically summer, cold season we'll call it, because of the all the ice or all the sea around it freezes. Even though it's only a meter thick, it's still like I still like hear about that and I'm like, dude, you think the sea levels would be affected by that, but they're not. Which kind of makes me think that the other sea level shit is kind of bullshit. But anyway, it gets stuck in this pack ice. Um, and this event forced the voyage to become the first to spend an entire winter in the Antarctic. So, and they were stuck in this ice for a year. And a lot of the Arctic exploration at the time, you kind of like purposely got stuck in ice. You would get stuck in ice and you would like let it break away from the thing and you would just drift around with like encased in an iceberg, basically. But these guys, this was clearly didn't mean that. They were running low on basically everything you can run low on. They're in the fucking Antarctic. They can't just hop off real quick. Although I guess they could, you know? Just hop off real quick, bang a penguin to death with a fucking stick, and then munch on that motherfucker. I imagine it's pretty similar to what. rotisserie chicken, but they weren't doing any of that. They were just chilling on this boat for the entire winter, and they were technically the first to spend an entire winter in the Antarctic, which I still don't. I am. I think they're flipping seasons here because their their cold season is our warm season. So I think they're talking about like this is our summer, but it's winter in Antarctica. I don't know. Is that the way they do things? I don't know if like they call summer or if they call winter summer in Australia because it's the opposite. I don't know if that's how it works, but they spent an entire winter in the Antarctic and they were the first to do it. So I imagine it was our summer, their winter. And they were there. The winter was marked by depression, near starvation, insanity, and scurvy. But our boy Roald remained dispassionate and used it as a learning experience regarding Arctic exploration techniques and preparation. You know what I mean? And we're going to talk about a lot of the supplies and shit that he brought down with him. He learned a lot from this. He was not fucking around when he went down Antarctica way. He was not messing around. And I mean, near insanity, I feel like I would go fully fucking insane. Yeah, I guess they could hop off the boat because they were surrounded by ice and the ice gets, well thick enough for a human to walk on it. Um, but still, dude, it's like you get off the boat and then what's there? Fucking just more ice and snow and all that shit. I feel like that would drive me insane. I almost went insane with one winter in fucking Minnesota. To be fair, it was basically Antarctica. It was completely flat, constantly frozen, like negative 30 degrees. It was a horrible, awful. But if that almost drove me insane, I got to imagine some of these dudes weren't near insanity. They were at it, and someone just, you know what I mean, hit them with that SEAL treatment and just clubbed them to fucking death and threw them overboard. Because it was the fucking, you know what I mean? It's 1898. You can still do that. You can still be like, he has a case of hysteria. We tried everything. We gave him we gave him cocaine and heroin and he's still not better. We're gonna have to kill him and throw him overboard. That's still the time we're living in here, so I imagine we did have a few cases of insanity, but not our boy Roald. He was kind of like the Goggins. He was staying fucking hard, getting in the right mindset, being like, all right, well, this fucking retard from Belgium failed. How can I do this better? So that's what Roald was doing the entire time he was down there. And another important thing about this particular expedition um, is that it marked the beginning of the heroic age of Arctic exploration, which I think is very interesting, as a whole. Just everything about it's so interesting. Just being like, dude, we had been to like every single fucking corner of the earth. It was all like perfectly charted out, but we still hadn't been to like the most extreme points yet. You know what I mean? And it's also an interesting time in history where like the early 20th century, late 19th century is when you have like this transitional period between like modernity and like the antique way of doing things. You know what I mean? Like you had the introduction of like cars and all that shit. You know what I mean? Electricity started to become like super widespread around that. So I think it's just like a very interesting time overall in history and specifically like these explorations. Like we're going to talk about that kind of clash between the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things that was going on around then. But yeah, this boy Rolled, he was just surrounded by remarkable events constantly. You know what I mean? He's kind of like a crisis actor. Just, you know what I mean? Those guys that are like somehow at every school shooting. That's that's who Rold was. I don't know. Maybe we need to get an early life check on Rold and figure out if the boy used to have a burger, a Stein in his. I'm just pissing everybody off this episode, dude. I got the Charlie Kirk, I got the Jews, I got the fucking women. I'm going after them all this episode. Somehow, in this entire thing of only talking about white people going to the Antarctic, I'm still gonna find a way to be racist. So, we're just going after everyone this episode. Um, so that was going on there. And so in June of 1903, Amundsen on fuck it rolled. I don't know why I kept writing down Amundsen. I couldn't even pronounce his name then, and I certainly can't pronounce it now. Uh, in June of 1903, Roald set out with a crew of six to conquer the Northwest Passage, and they were the first to complete the passage 3 years later in 1906, dude. And so the Northwest Passage, if you don't know, it's the northern connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, right? So you basically have to go like up and around and like kind of through Canada and all that stuff. So this is you got to remember, dude, this is like basically 100 years after Lewis and Clark walked across America, and they still hadn't like sailed around the Northwest Passage and all that stuff. And these guys were the first ones to do it, and it took them 3 years to get it done, which is not a practical amount of time in any way, shape, or form. And in 20 years, they would have like the Panama Canal anyway. Maybe I think Teddy Roosevelt was heavily involved in that, and he was around the 1910s, so they might have already had the Panama Canal by then. And our boy Roald was just doing this for a whole lot of fun. But despite the fact that it was kind of like this completely impractical thing that didn't really have any, grand economic repercussions in terms of like new shipping routes or whatever. He was still like commended as a hero. They were like, dude, he fucking did it. It still took him 3 years to do it, but he did it on like it's called like a sloop ship. I think it's called. It's like a flat bottom, not a super shitty ship, but like definitely not a great one. And he did it with only 6 dudes. That's kind of crazy. So I'd be like, yeah, this dude's a hero, or he's out of his goddamn mind. Maybe a little bit of both. And I think most of these Arctic guys are. Like, you look at pictures of them, they all got that dog in their eyes. Like, I was just looking at a picture of that dude. What was his name? Adrian de Galarche or whatever. He ain't have that, that Arctic explorer look in his eyes. Our boy Roald, though, he does have that look in his eyes. That just dog in him. And with 6 dudes on, like, basically a John boat, navigated the Northwest Passage for the first time in history. Like, dude, you gotta remember, you're going over, like, the northernmost point of Alaska when you're doing that shit in just a tiny shitty little boat. And I'm sure they stopped a whole bunch, but still, like those parts up in Canada were like completely uninhabited. Like un, no one was up there. Like even the Inuits were like, dude, we're not for the Eskimos. I guess I don't know if Yupik people, whatever, Eskimos, uh, they weren't even up there. They were still like, yeah, no, dude, there might have been like a few pockets of people up there a little bit, but not as far north as our boy Rold was going. Although maybe, yeah, there probably was like a couple up there, but they weren't sailing along the whole thing. Our boy Rold was though. So in the early 20th century, the British seemed like they would conquer the South Pole, but Amundsen refused to preemptively cede victory to them. And at this point, we still got the North Pole and the South Pole haven't been like fully reached yet. And the British were going on a run back then. You know what I mean? They conquered like India, giant portion of Africa. They had colonies all over the world. I'm sure at this point they still had I think they had Belize and Honduras were both English colonies, and Guyana as well. So, dude, they had fucking colonies on basically every continent. You know what I mean? Definitely Australia and Canada too. So, yeah, they had colonies all over. So I don't blame people for being like, yeah, obviously the fucking British are going to be the first to get there and like conquer it. And if there is any people there, they're all going to get killed or enslaved. That's that's what the British would have done, all right? They would have been like, "Where's the gold at? Okay, there's the gold. We're gonna kill all you guys now." That's what the British would have done. And if anyone would have been the first to get there, you would have thought it would have been the British. You know what I mean? At this point in history, but Rold said, "Hell no. We ain't losing another one to the British." All right, I got that dog in me. I'm from fucking Norway. I grew up eating penguin meat, fried penguin. That's what Rold was doing. He wouldn't let the British be the ones to conquer the poles. So in 1907, Norwegian Arctic explorer Fridtjof Nansen, who was a hero of Rold, gave Rold permission to use his boat Fram. Fram. Those fuckers can't pronounce anything, right? They have like the A with the 2 little dots over. Fuck them. All right, we're calling this bitch the Fram. All right. I'm from the Midwest. I don't know. Maybe if you're from the East Coast, you'd say from. Uh, but I'm from the Midwest, bitch. All right, the fucking part of the country that feeds everyone else. I'm gonna say Fram. And this dude, Friedhof, he was just another Norwegian beast. And this ship, the Fram, uh, was basically just chilling in storage at this point. It technically belonged, I think, to the royal family or maybe to like the government. It belonged to one of those two entities. And so it technically was no one's, but everyone knew, like, dude, if Nansen says he wants the boat back, you give the boat back to Nansen. All right. And the reason they wanted to use this boat is because it was just like the best boat at doing stuff like this. Like it had I think it's called greenheart wood is the type of wood that was used on this boat, and it was the hardest known wood in the world at this time. It had like and they used the greenheart wood to like reinforce the front of the boat, so if it ran into like an iceberg or whatever, it wouldn't get fucked up. So this boat was a beast. You know what I mean? The frame was a beast of a boat. And so yeah, our boy Roald basically wrote a letter to Nansen and he was like, please, please, please let me use your boat. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this boat. So Fram had previously survived 3 years in polar ice and had been used to chart 100 square miles of northern Canadian territory. And these dudes weren't Canadian. I'm sure the Canadian government gave them a little bit of cash to do this whole thing, but once again, they were just doing it for the love of the game at this point, just literally like years in polar ice, just like drifting around. Like that was these people's plan. It was literally to get locked in ice and basically just like drift around up there until you hit like a solid one of the polar ice caps. And they were just doing that. So, and Roald originally planned to use the boat to reach the North Pole, but he changed plans after it had been reached twice in 1908. You know, the North Pole, and once again, that's an easier one to conquer because you have to go over less land, and also, obviously, people live kind of near there. You know what I mean? You have the Inuits and the Yubiks all living up there, living close to it. And so it's a lot more reachable. It's a lot more reasonable to get up there. Um, but and so they did, and Roald was like, "Fuck, dude. Well, now I can't go to the North Pole. People did it like twice already in 1908. I can't fucking, you know what I mean, do it again. No one's gonna remember the third guy to do it. So he's like, we gotta go south, man. You know what I mean? When the North doesn't work, you go south. That's what Roald said. You know, he's just more of a down south type of guy. He was a Texas guy. He loved himself a bit of barbecue, and he said, let's go down south. So that was his plan in 1907 he wanted to go north, but then he had to go south. So Roald kept the plan private for fear of withdrawal from funders and Nansen. So you got to remember again, this dude Nansen is like a personal hero of Roald, and now Roald has to like kind of betray him a little bit to be like, no, I'm totally gonna go north, dude. Yeah, I definitely want to be the first person to reach the North Pole. Yeah, third. Third's the best number. Of course, I want to be the third person to get up there. Whole time, our boy Rold is just like, fuck that. I'm gonna go see some penguins, dude. I'm gonna go dance with Happy Feet. I don't give a fuck if I die. I don't care if I gotta betray my boy Nansen. And also, the funders, I guess, were more interested in the North Pole. And also, a big part of these expeditions were like scientific charting. So basically all these dudes were sailors, and so they would like take the measurements and all that stuff, and then I guess the scientists would actually figure shit out about it because there wasn't scientists on the boat. You know, if there were, they probably would have snitched on our boy Rold. So I guess these dudes were just down there taking measurements and all that shit. And this also is like early 1900s science where they were like measuring people's skull sizes and all that shit. So yeah, I don't think the science was that hard to do. I think the average sailor could do the science back then. So he was just overall scared that people were gonna, take the shit away from him that he needed to do to get down to Antarctica, because he didn't want to go north. And by the way, the Fram is a sailing boat. This is the early 1900s, but I guess all of these boats were still sailing boats. And I think part of the reason for that is just like fuel. You can't carry enough fuel to like really get down there in Antarctica, and there's like nowhere to pick any fuel up. So these are all sailing boats. That it being made out of wood should have been a hint to me that it was a sailing boat, but I was still like, were they using motors to get down there? No, they were using the fucking wind, dude. This guy reached the South Pole using wind. It's fucking crazy. So, um, so he's kind of lying about this whole thing, and so he planned to set up his base in the Bay of Whales, whose ice had been considered too unstable for previous explorers. there was a few other dudes who had been down to Antarctica at that point, but obviously none of them had reached the South Pole. In this place, the Bay of Whales, it's kind of, you know how Antarctica kind of has like that wavy shape to it? The Bay of Whales, it's pretty deep in there. So there's this place called the Weddell Sea, and then like even further than the Weddell Sea is the Bay of Whales. And I don't know, they were probably killing a fuck ton of whales there. You gotta remember 1800s. They were using whale blubber for like light. Like that's how they got light in the fucking 1800s. So they must have been murdering those whales down in the fucking Bay of Whales. Um, but the ice, I guess it didn't get thick enough, or like it might have gotten thick enough, but it was like in these weird sheets that were kind of too unstable to build an actual base on. But Roald, he was like, dude, it's the quickest way to like reach the South Pole from our boat. We're just gonna have to fucking risk the biscuit and build our little hut on the Bay of Whales ice. So for his land expedition, he ordered 100 Greenland sledge dogs, which, by the way, I didn't know this. Apparently, the people, the Inuits up there in Greenland, although there might be, I don't know, there might be pigs. That's why I just say Eskimos, because it's like I got all my bases covered there. They had their own dogs. I always thought it was the Europeans or whoever brought the dogs up there. No, they had their own dogs already. So he ordered 100 of those dogs, and basically everything these dudes did, like how they traveled and how they like prepared their um, provisions and all that stuff, it was all inspired by the Greenland natives specifically. Although they did take some inspiration from Canadian Inuit peoples. And so ordered 100 of these dogs and had sleds, skis, and like I said, these Inuit inspired clothing made. And these clothes, some of them were made out of sealskin, some of them were made out of like these European materials, right? Or I guess like Western materials. Uh, like there was a special type of like cloth he had, and he made some of the clothes out of that. But sealskin suits were a big part of it because obviously seals fucking they live in the water there, so they're used to the cold, and so they make the clothes out of that sealskin. And I'm really compressing a lot of information here, but that's kind of every episode, but in this one especially, like he had so much shit. Like he had a special type of pemmican made, and pemmican is like it's fat and protein and a little bit of fruit, but he had a special type made where they replaced a lot of that with oatmeal. So it was just like fat and meat and oatmeal. And he was using that to get down south. So the journey. All right. So Fram, and I don't know why they don't call it the Fram, they just call it Fram. I don't know. I guess that's like that whole thing of like sailors having like a weird sexual connection to their boats because they just call it Fram. They don't call it the Fram. Like I did that episode about the Essex, the sinking of the Essex, where the dudes all fucking turned each other into a big slab of pork ribs and ate each other. And they just called it Essex throughout the whole thing. So I guess you just call it Fram, but that's pretty retarded. I like the Fram better. So the Fram reached the Bay of Whales in late 1910, and by January of 1911, a base had been constructed there on the ice. So they had this neat little just classic hut, you know what I mean? Uh, and it basically took them like a month to get this whole thing set up, and it was 2.2 nautical miles away from the boat. But at this point, they're on land, or I guess they're technically on ice. But it's still like, why are we using nautical? Well, first of all, why are we using nautical miles in the fucking first place at all? That's dumb as shit. And then we're using it when we're talking about, a surface that dudes can walk on. It's kind of fucking ridiculous, but whatever. So they had this whole thing set up, and like I said, dude, these expeditions, they were long. These dudes, this one was actually relatively quick. I think he did this in less time than it took him to sail the Northwest Passage, which is pretty crazy. Uh, so they were there for a couple years. So on February 3rd, 1911, British explorer Victor Campbell arrived in the Bay of Whales on the Terra Nova, which I guess was their boat. Terra means land. Does Nova mean new? I think this boat's name is New Land. So they pulled up there, and every British boat should be named New Land because they're like, oh, we discovered Australia. Ignore the 2 million people living here. We discovered it. This is new land. New land to the British. And to be fair to the British, they were putting up fucking numbers back then. You know what I mean? No one else was doing it like him back then, so you can't blame them for being, a little bit cocky about the whole thing. You can't. So these guys pulled up, and obviously Roald, he offered them a site near Framheim, and Heim, I guess, means house in Norwegian. I think in German as well. I think German has a very close suffix like Heim, where it means like this is the house or this is the land of Fram. But Heim means house. So Framheim was where they were set up at, but Campbell declined and returned to McMurdo, which is 60 nautical miles to the north of the Bay of Whales, where our boy Rolled and his boys were chilling at. So obviously Rold was freaking out a little bit, but these dudes were all the way up in McMurdo, and McMurdo is still, I think it's the biggest Antarctic research station in the world. Like 1,000 people live there. And you know how I was talking about the bullshit Antarctic before? McMurdo's kind of the bullshit Antarctic, where it's like, yeah, you're technically on the continent of Antarctica, but it's kind of some bullshit. You know what I mean? Like you can still see like the land that's underneath you. You know what I mean? It's not constantly covered in ice and snow and all that stuff. So they were technically on Antarctica, but they were kind of on the bullshit part. And these dudes obviously they had a big head start on them, real big head start. And Antarctica, it's very flat and it's a desert, right? It's the largest desert in the world, although it is an Arctic desert, which there's a difference between tropical and Arctic. So it's not easy to cross. That's the point I was trying to get across there, where it's like 60 nautical miles. That may seem like our boy Rold only has like at most a week ahead of these dudes, but it might be like significantly more than a week that he has on these guys. So the Norwegians were concerned about the Brits who had motorized sleds, and that was the whole like new versus old thing, right? Because you got to remember our boy Rold, he's just got 100, Eskimo dogs. Meanwhile, the Brits are riding around on these motorized sleds. But dude, this is fucking like early 20th century motor technology in the Antarctic. I gotta imagine these fucking motorized sleds weren't that good, dude. Like, even if you drive a newer car and you live in like Minnesota, like I was saying, you're concerned about your car starting in the wintertime. Like, even now, in a place that's not as cold, you're still concerned about your car starting. So I think Rold is kind of freaking out about nothing, right? Around here, right? Because you got to remember those Greenland sledge dogs. Sorry, I don't know why my brain broke there. They've been bred for like hundreds of years to be sledge dogs. So I think Rold was kind of freaking out about nothing. Like this is the early 1900s. Obviously now we probably got a vehicle that's better than the dogs, but still back then you can calm down, my boy. I don't think the Brits are gonna beat you with a fucking 12 horsepower motorized fucking car. I think you're good with the dogs. And then the Brits were also very concerned about the massive head start that Rold had on them. So in February uh, of 1911, I assume, the crew laid out depots containing 7,500 pounds of supplies along their future route to the pole. So they were, like I said, when Rolls went down there, he was taking notes. You know what I mean? He had that little fucking, notebook that lawyers have, and he was scribbling in that thing, being like, all right, this is what I need to do to get down there. And they had, I think, like, I think, like, this is 7,500 pounds. I think, like, 1,000 pounds of it was seal meat. Like, they had a ton of seal meat and blubber and all that stuff. And they were building, like, these little, shacks along the way that they could stop and get the food at, which that's I guess that makes a little bit of sense. And there was one point where they kind of like turned around because the weather was too extreme when they were laying out these depots, so they didn't have like the full thing, but they still had 7,500 pounds of shit along their future route. So they were they were pretty set. You know what I mean? At this point, I'm not going to call it a chip in. They're still not at the goal line yet. They're still not in the end zone, but they're getting pretty close to it. You know what I mean? The Brits, they have another, I don't know how long a nautical mile is compared to a regular mile, but These boys down here, they got a decent chunk of change in terms of the amount of uh land that they have to go across, and then they also have these depots. Okay, so 1 nautical mile is equal to 1.15 regular miles. God damn, that's just so annoying, dude. 60 nautical miles is 69 regular miles. Fucking sick, dude. So cool. All right. They set out all these depots, and in September of 1911, the party started on their journey to the pole, but uh, turned back due to the conditions that were going on back then. And once again, you might be thinking September, like this is going to take them a while to get down there. They're going to be doing this in the middle of winter. It's summertime for them, so this is the best time to do it down there. And that's when I was reading, and I'm clearing something up that I was kind of like dumb about, where I was like, why the fuck are they going in September? It's because it's opposite day down there. You know what I mean? Um, and so that's why they were going in the fall and then into the winter. So they turned back, and Roald was obviously very excited. He had been dreaming of this shit since he was a kid. You know what I mean? He went on that boat that went up there and beat all those seals to death. So he was fucking hyped about the Arctic, but he was able to, calm himself down a little bit. This guy's a real level-headed guy. So he was able to just, bring it down a little bit, and he waited over a month, uh, officially starting his journey on October 19th, 1911. So after summiting a glacier, the crew slaughtered 27 of their 45 dogs for meat and prepared for 60 days of marching. So I guess they needed the 45 dogs to get up to this glacier in the first place, but then after that, they didn't need the dogs because the terrain was more flat or something. Like they weren't starving. That's the thing. They weren't even starving at this point. They just needed to kill 27 dogs. And the thing that like indicates that fact to me is they gave a lot of the meat to the dogs, right? So they killed the dogs and then they fed the meat to the dogs. And obviously these are like dog sled teams, and the leader of each of the teams had to kill all his dogs himself, which is just crazy. So they I think they still had seal meat on them, but they just didn't need the rest of the dogs, and so they had to kill them, not all of them, but they had to kill 27. So they only had 18 dogs left at this point. So the party set off across a scarred landscape of crevasses, some of which were covered with a thin layer of snow. So it's basically just a big ass iceberg up there, and from that, there's basically these canyons get carved, but they're even like more narrow than a canyon, and even more like deceiving. Some of them had like a very thin layer of snow. And Roald said that the ones that were covered with the thin layer of snow had like this weird, like haunting whistling sound coming, from underneath them. And I don't know if wind gets under that. I don't know exactly how any of that shit works. Maybe it's like the pieces of ice creaking against each other, but that must have been terrifying, dude. Like you're basically going across a minefield, which like if you take one wrong turn, you're dead. And then you hear like this weird, creepy, like, whoa, dude. I'd have been out of there. I would have been on foot out of there. I would have killed the rest of the dogs and then been on my way, dude. That's what I would have been doing. I would have left all those fucking people in the dust as soon as I heard the fucking whoa. And he describes it as like haunting. So I imagine this was a pretty fucking creepy noise. But they kept it pushing, dude. He wanted to get to the South Pole. And so they're still moving at this point. And on December 12th, the crew became alarmed after seeing black objects on the horizon, but these turned out to be dog turds amplified by mirage. And the reason mirages happen in deserts is there obviously is like the dehydration and then hallucination aspect of mirages, but it's also the way the sun interacts with like the super flat reflective surface of the desert. And obviously Antarctica is a desert, but it's a polar desert, so it's snow instead of sand, but I guess there could still be mirages. And so they thought these dog turds were like the British coming down there, but it turns out it was just dog turds, and they were just freaking out about nothing. All right, so they kept it pushing. They saw the dog turds. It freaked them out a little bit. They were like, "Oh fuck, dog turds," and then they kept it pushing. On December 14th, 1911, the party reached the polar plateau and named it King Haakon the Seventh's plateau, which Amundsen, he did find that ironic because he was like, let me see if I can find the exact quote. It was something along the lines of no guy has ever like not wanted to um have something named after him less, but have it be more important. It was fuck. I'm butchering that. That's one of the worst butcherings I've ever done on this show, and I made a Charlie Kirk fucking joke this episode, and it still wasn't as bad as this thing. So let me see if I can find it. 1911. God dang, dude. You would not believe how much fucking bullshit there is on there about this. So, yeah, never has a man achieved a goal so diametrically opposed to his wishes. The area around the North Pole, devil take it, had fascinated me since childhood, and now I was at the South Pole. Could anything be more crazy? So, yeah, part of it was the fact that he had lied to uh, King Haakon, who was one of the funders of this exploration, but it was supposed to be a North Pole, and he just said fuck it and went to the South Pole instead, which that must have been funny as hell because there was like some comment in the article uh where the guy who he was getting some of these tools from, he was like, "Why do you want South Pole tools?" Right? Or not tools, like measuring devices of some sort. It was some like scientific bullshit. And the guy who was giving them to Roald was like, dude, why do you want the South Pole versions of it? And he was like, dude, so I can like compare with the North Pole, obviously. And the guy was just like, fuck it, here you go. Here you go. So we made it, dude. King Hack the Seventh Plateau. So the group pitched a tent near the pole as possible, and left gear for Scott and a letter addressed to Hacken. And do you think that letter got to Hacken? So the group reached Australia in March 1912 and spread the word of their accomplishment, and Scott and his men died on their journey to the South Pole. And Scott was, I don't know if I said it earlier, he was the rival guy. So the other guy that pulled up to the Fryham camp, Frameham camp, that guy Victor Campbell was like, he was one of uh what's this guy's name? It was like something Falcon Scott. He was one of his boys, but our boy Scott, he was like the actual leader of the British expedition. And yeah, this dude died when he was trying to get to the South Pole, but our boy didn't, you know what I mean? Like I said, I don't know if everyone's built like our boy Roald, in terms of explorers back then. Like the British probably felt like hot shit, because they had conquered half the world or whatever, but they ain't go to Antarctica. You know what I mean? Our boy Roald, he did make it down there though. So you got to give him his props. And it really didn't take him that long. I think the whole journey was like it was less than like 2 months or something insane like that. No, it wasn't less than 2 months. It was like less than a year though, which I feel like is a pretty fucking quick time frame to get down to like march down to the South Pole and back in with sled dogs. It's pretty quick. But yeah, they did it, dude. We did it. We did it. All right. Well, that's all I've got for this episode. People are gonna be mad about all the jokes I made. I'm sorry. Sorry. And some the jokes are not funny, but they are jokes. So. But whatever. That's all I've got for this episode, guys. I hope you have a good day, a good week, a good year, a good life, dude. I hope your winter is as great as fucking Roald Amundsen's exploration across the Arctic. You know what I mean? I hope your time in the frozen tundra is as nice as his was. You're obviously not, conquering a new continent, but you can still do some things over the course of a winter. So I hope you do it. All right? All right. Have a good day.